Hello everyone, welcome to the Art Workshop. My name is Christopher Epling. We're so glad you tuned in today. We have a very cool program in store for you. At the time of this recording, we're going into the fall season, and I'm sure everyone's probably looking forward to that. I love fall personally. It's my favorite season, and just with the temperatures starting to change a little bit, the leaves starting to fall, it's just it's a good feeling to getting out of some of this heat. So today I picked something that's going to be a little refreshing too. Hopefully you'll find it. And it's really important if you'd like to draw along. That's the whole reason for the show. So grab some paper and a pencil, maybe an ink pen or whatever you have at home that you can use, an eraser too would be helpful, and we'll draw together. And if you do that, we'd love to see what you create. Be sure and send it to us at piketv99@gmail.com. Include your name and a little bit about yourself, and we'll be sure to share your work here on the show. And for today's episode, what I've decided to do is something, like I said, landscape-based, but there's a few elements of art here that we're going to play around with that I really think is important, especially for anybody who's interested in learning about how to draw, learning about how to capture perspective, which is one of probably the biggest, most problematic areas in developing a young artist's ability, and it is for me still today. Perspective can really be thrown off very easily just by a line being placed where it doesn't need to go, or positioning elements in your composition in ways that doesn't really match up to the natural world. So we're going to try to play around with something today using perspective and a nature scene, like I said. So our waterfall is our subject for today. And the tools that I have, just so everybody's clear on that, I want to show everyone. I just have a pencil. I have an eraser today, of course. I brought a couple of different erasers. I have a block eraser, and then this here, it's a mechanical eraser. A couple options for pencils too. I also brought some pens in with me. Some of these are brush pens, some of these are felt pens, and just a variety of things that I might need. I have a few more markers over here to the side, just in case I need it, because in this drawing, as we start to go along, you're going to find that there are stages or different segments that require shading, and ink's really great for that, but you don't necessarily have to use ink to shade with. You can also, of course, use graphite pencil and get a similar effect, maybe a little different, but similar. Now, before we start, I want to show you exactly kind of what we're going to be doing in terms of the composition for this piece, okay? Just watch this from home right now, and I'll give you an idea. So there's going to be about 4 to 5 different areas of this drawing that we're going to focus on, okay? The first one will be up front here in this area, which is going to be your foreground. Then moving past that, almost like a triangle moving upwards, okay? We're going to have an additional area in the back here where the waterfall actually starts to hit the water below it. So that is your secondary foreground, and then you'll have at the top up here an additional section. So you're actually playing around with 1, 2, 3 main sections of the composition, plus you'll have some trees coming this way and trees down here. So there's a few things happening. You'll have many trees popping up along the shoreline, the bank, and then over here as well. We'll have trees, and then up here, following this line, we're going to have some pretty tall trees coming up this way. So the composition is going to be broken up in different ways, but our goal here is to try to get this to match what you might find in a real-world scenario. The water will be coming down in the middle, so that's why I've left this intentionally blank here. You'll be able to see sections. So there's 2 sections to this waterfall. There's a large section at the top, then it comes down and kind of cascades down into the pool of water here below. So that's going to be behind our bottom in the foreground here. You may see a little water coming this way. We may draw portions of maybe a little creek or the beginnings of a tributary coming out this way, kind of moving down towards the lower part of the drawing. So this is the setup for our composition. Now, composition is super important when you're working with perspective, because you need to know where the elements set against one another, okay? Another example, just before we begin, so we're clear on what we're doing, is an exercise I've seen many times by other artists where they will create a straight line for your horizon. Create a circle for a vanishing point in the middle, and you can draw 2 lines coming out from that, and then you add lines connecting these lines. As you get closer to your vanishing point, these lines will get closer together. So they're going to get so close together that eventually you're not even be able to tell one from the other. It's just going to be a blur, right? This is railroad tracks. So perspective works similar no matter if you're using straight lines like this going into a point, or, and you can imagine some rows of mountains out here in the distance, right? You're standing in the middle of the desert looking out into this railroad track going off into the distance. So what we're doing today has some similarities to that. There is going to be, our vanishing point will be located somewhere up here. Okay, our horizon line, that's a little tricky because you have 3 portions of the composition. So we're actually going to have 3 lines that we have to work with. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so let's get started. Based on what we've just looked at and discussed, I think we have a little bit of a grasp on perspective and how it's used in a proper way. Of course, you can't learn it all just that fast. It's something you literally have to work with over and over and practice and get better with. I still have to do it all the time. It's a process. Art is a process. It continually changes. Your technique will change. Your ability will change the more you do it. Okay? Let's start out and get our drawing underway for real this time. So please follow along with me at home. And we're going to start now up here at the top. I'd like to go ahead, actually we'll start at the bottom. That might be a little bit easier. So you're going to come over to the left-hand portion of the bottom of your page, and you're going to draw a shape that comes down like this and stops. Okay, it's just a crooked line. It's going to have to, it doesn't really matter how you draw this, but the main point of this is that this line has to drop down further than where you started. Okay, so where you end has to be lower than where you started. Now we're going to skip over just a little bit to about right here on the right hand side. You're going to do something similar. You're going to bring this line now going up like that. Okay. Now we've established our first portion of the foreground, which we need in the first of those 3 segments. Okay, this is our first. From here, what I'd like to do is we're going to create the second. We just need a line for this. So we're going to jump up here. We're going to bring a line coming down. Again, this, where it ends, needs to be lower than where it begins. Something like that. And then again over here, bring it up. Now your lines do not have to look exactly like mine at all. They can be completely different if you want them to be. We have our third section, which is up here. Again, we're going to draw a line coming in, stopping, and then over here too. Notice how these shapes start out very wide, and as we go up, they start to move closer together towards the middle of the page. Okay, that's what we need. Now this looks nothing like a waterfall yet, but remember what we talked about at the beginning. We've established 1, 2, 3 sections. So now what we're going to do is connect those sections with where the water will be. You're going to start at the main top to do that. You're just going to bring a line coming down here and here. Okay, that's going to be the first beginning portions of our little waterfall. You can seal it off with a little line in the middle if you want, like that. Jump down to your middle portion of your composition, and here what we're going to see is that there's actually a small pool of water here as well. This water starts off coming off the top very fast, lands into a pool of water here, small pool of water, slows it down just a little bit. So these, the current's going to be a little bit different down here at the bottom, so it's going to be a little bit smaller waterfall, somewhat smaller. We'll draw in the details for the water later. Now, this goes down into another pool of water, which we'll draw here. So you're bringing a line that's going to come in towards you, like that, on both sides. Okay? Now down here, where this water comes down, is where our little tributary starts. And so we need to have some lines to form that. So we're going to bring this line connecting here, coming in towards us, and another line over here coming down, bringing that in towards us as well. And then there we go. We've got our 3 sections to our composition, and now we can start going in and putting details in. We also have to be careful in a minute when we work with trees, because the trees will have to follow a certain rule for perspective as well. Okay, let's start with the trees that's closest to us. So down here at the bottom right of your page, I want you to draw just a straight line, a few of these straight lines going up, forming these trees. Okay, it's going to be quite large, so you have 2 lines here. These trees that are closer to you are going to be more easily seen. Obviously, they're closer. Just putting a little bit of detail now in the tree. A few of these lines here. I think it's a birch tree, it has that. Water birch maybe, something like that. But I know you've seen these types of trees. And we're going to have a few more of those too here, kind of thrown about in different areas. So we need one on this side to frame up our composition correctly. Kind of frames it, up, makes it nice and uniform and symmetric. This one's going to come up too. Now, you don't necessarily have to worry so much about the tops of these trees, because they kind of just go off up into the past our vanishing point, our horizon lines, off into the distance. So a little bit of detail going up that tree now. Now we need more. Obviously, we're in a forest, so we're going to have to actually add a few. So you can put as many as you really want here, or can fit in. I think I can fit maybe one more on this side, on this level. And then from there, we'll add a couple more on the other side as well. There we go. You can see how it's already starting to frame up now. It looks more like an actual scene you would see, in nature. But we're not done at all. We have a lot to do. Over here on this side, I like the way this one tree sort of sets on this bank. So I think what I'm going to do is just put a little detail at the bottom, jump up to the next section here, maybe put a little bit of a bend in a tree coming up this way from behind it, like that. You see the top of it a little bit here. Almost looks like a limb's extending from that tree. That'll work too, that's fine. But this section now, this middle level to the composition, is where I'm going to focus now. The trees that are going to appear on this section are going to be the same type of tree in a lot of ways, but they're going to be a little bit smaller, a little bit thinner. You don't want to make them really thick because it's further away from you, right? So they would look a little bit smaller. Let's add a couple here. And then the other side as well. One here. A couple more to do. The more you put in, the better in some cases, and sometimes the less you have is more too. So this depends on what the drawing calls for, I think. Okay, now we've established at least the first 2 levels of trees fairly well. I think that's going to work out pretty good. And what we're going to do now is jump up to the main top, and we're going to work a little bit on the main last or top portion of the composition. Now for this, the trees are going to be a little bit different. We're going to just draw some straight lines coming down. You can have different heights on this if you want. These are going to be more of pine trees instead of the trees that we have at the bottom. Okay, so, and what will happen here, and watch these straight lines as I draw them. I'm going to draw a few more extending down and into this composition here. See how that works? These straight lines come down, they get shorter and shorter until you can't see them anymore. That is perspective in a nutshell, because if you're standing here on this level looking up at this drawing, this waterfall, if we're in real life standing here, we wouldn't be able to see all the trees that are behind this top level of your composition, right? Because it would extend past where you're able to see, and it will look as if, like with the railroad tracks, they get closer together until you can actually not be able to make sense of what's what down here. It just looks like a lot of green probably if this was painted. So now we need to turn these actually though into pine trees. That's pretty easy to do. Start at the top. You're going to draw a series of these lines And as you get towards the bottom of your line, the big line, you're going to make them thicker, okay? You draw more of them and make them longer, make them stick out further until you get to the bottom and you can stop, okay? See how that works? And you're going to do that again and again and again until you fill up all of the trees around the top portion. So I'm going to do that now. Just doing a series of hatches. Do the same thing here. Okay, and down this way. And down this way. All right, now this is a little tricky as you start working on these lines that blend in with one another. This, you just really need to go in there and fill that up, or those little areas in here up with just some shadows, just a few hatches like this. So you're not going to see a lot of detail, okay? It's going to be really, really hard to see each individual tree as you get further down towards the middle of the drawing. We can add a few more pine trees if you want on the other side at the top too. These, of course, are going to be going down towards the middle of the drawing as well. Just a few there, like that, okay? And then we're going to put our details on there. So all this is just a series of lines, pencil lines, that we've rearranged in a way that creates the illusion of being something that it's not, right? So obviously this is not a photograph of a waterfall, but you could probably show this to even a child and ask them, what are we looking at? And they'll probably tell you, if they're old enough to recognize it, a waterfall. There's a lot of details that are still missing here in the middle, which we're going to work on now, but the idea though is it's called implied lines in art. With implied lines, it means that you don't have to be 100% realistic. You can kind of go in a different direction with it, where you give the impression of whatever it is you're trying to draw, but you're not necessarily trying to draw it to look like a photograph, okay? One of the hardest things though to do implied or work with implied lines with is rocks. So we have a lot of rocks though coming up. The reason it's hard with rocks is that you have to draw a lot, in nature there's not a lot of straight lines and there's not a lot of perfect circles and those sorts of things. So you want to draw chaotic shapes here to resemble what we might find in nature. We're going to start this time up here at the top. Mostly the reason I'm doing that is because graphite can get smudgy really bad. It could smudge up the paper. If I start down here and start moving up this way, I'm probably going to move my graphite around a lot on the page and cause a lot of blemishes down here. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to start up here at the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a series of lines just coming down, all of different shapes and sizes, all different types of different ways the lines move. So some will go up, some will go down, until it looks almost like a puzzle piece in a way, because all these different little lines in here come together to form what we're trying to do. And maybe add another little rock here at the bottom, just kind of sticking out in the water. Maybe another rock here. These are smaller, like that, okay? Because we want to give that impression that this water is falling into this pool of water and then down to the lower level. All right. Now from here what we're going to do is jump onto the left side, and with the left side we're going to do another series of shapes and things. And I might draw a really large rock right here, because you may not want tons of little rocks. You may want a few very big, large size stones, and then kind of give yourself a little bit of variety. There we go. This way, a few more here, and we'll stop right there. So we have now what we need to go in. Now what really makes this turn into an actual drawing instead of these just lines is shadowing. We're going to work on that at the very end. So I want us to continue to go down the page now, adding more and more and more of these stones, okay? So let's draw a few more stones down here. Draw a really large one there. A few more lines here. There we go. All right. Notice I placed a few more rocks down here at the bottom. As the water comes down, it's going to be rushing into these rocks. So I like to see a few rocks actually sitting out in the water too, like that. Something like that. Now let's move on to our right side. Just drawing a series of lines again. Very chaotic, sporadic. There we go. All right, now we're going to save this down here at the bottom, I think, for just a little bit. We're going to start at the top up here. Now what I'd like for you to do is you have to imagine in a way that there's a light source. You have to try to pretend that you can see like a sun, like the sun up here, and the sun is of course emitting light. So based on where the sun's location is in this drawing, we need to now determine where would the shadow be. So I'm going to go and actually start below here. So I'm going to turn my pencil to the side a little bit, and I'm going to go in, and I'm going to add a series of these shaded in segments that is going to be the opposite of where our sun is. Notice how I put a lot of shadows towards the bottom, but up here at the top there's not as many, because obviously that's where the light source is coming in at. Now you got to remember too, some rocks are going to be casting their own shadows, right? So if you have a very large boulder like that, you're probably going to have a lot of shadow around it towards the bottom down here. Okay, doesn't mean everything's going to be colored in, but it's definitely going to make a difference on what we choose to shadow and don't. Something like that. Now the good thing about working with shadowing and going in and putting highlights or shadows in is that you can continually work on it over and over and over again. So, you know, it's not, the work's never feels done. You want to just keep playing with it and getting it right. But we do have a time limit, so we need to kind of be a little conservative here on how much time we spend on each section. But if you have a lot of free time, or I know none of us really do, but if you ever get a chance to have some free time, right, and you'd like to add more and more shadow, you can continue to do that. Okay. Now you wouldn't believe this, or maybe you would, but you know, we're over 100 shows here on the Art Workshop, and I bet anything, in fact I absolutely know, that if you were to go to our YouTube page, Pike TV's YouTube page, you actually be able to find more examples on perspective and working with shadowing. And you can do that, just go to YouTube and search for Pike TV 99, and then once you get there, of course there's playlists, and jump on those playlists. You will see the Art Workshop, click on it, and then scroll through, and a lot of times, you know, in the title you'll know pretty much kind of what's happening, and then, you know, they've done a great job of organizing all these videos for you right there. At the click of a button, you can go and check out all the examples on perspective and shadowing. All right, so now we have what appears to be rocks that are shadowed in and forming the top layer of where this waterfall is, right? So now what we need to do is jump down to the next level. Same premise on the next level. You have to imagine though, the sun's up here, the top level is closer to that, the top gets more sun to it, so down here it's going to be probably a little bit more darker in some areas, because you have the shadow from not only these rocks, but since this is closer to us and stepping down towards us, you know, there's going to be more shadow probably forming on a lot of this. So this is going to be a little bit darker down here. This is where you can really get in there. And if you have a graphite pencil, this is probably the best to do this with. You could do it with just any pencil though. Like I said, take it and just turn it over to its side, and then you can fill up all this space like that. Okay. There we go. And let's see, we'll jump down here now towards the next level, keep working our way down. We're adding these shadows as we go So you can see how it's starting to come together a little bit now. And you know, depending on depending on how this looks at the end, I may or may not go in and ink, because sometimes if you start to ink, then you really have to do the entire drawing. And I think I like the way this graphite's looking on here, but I will show you another technique with smudging at the end. That's also why we did not start at the bottom and go up earlier with the pencil. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's keep moving. Let's keep creating shadows. We have a lot of space to fill up here. Whenever you're in doubt, just remember, whatever's closer to your light source is lighter. Whatever's farther away from it is going to be darker. Just a rule of thumb with that. Keep going. There we go. Now, notice what's happened after we've done this. When we first started out, we only had these lines that look like a puzzle piece making up our rocks. And we didn't go in and draw every little detail, like the cracks in the rocks or the breaks or anything else. Well, all we did really was come in here and start to put some shadowing in down below where our light source is. And that shadow gives the effect of there being shapes in the rocks. Different, it's not a flat surface. There's going to be different parts of the rock that's going to pick up on shadow versus another, okay? So that's good. If you can achieve that, you can still work with that and get it to look even better than what it might look already, okay? Play around with it as much as you want. Now we're going down, we have one more section right here, almost passed it up. Got to get these rocks close to the water too. That's important. That, and you have a few rocks out here in the water. And we got, of course, right here is another section. Moving down this way. There we go. All right, now we're going to work on this main bottom part. Let's sharpen my pencil a little bit. It sure does use the graphite for a big, large piece like this. Okay, the bottom. Now here we're going to see more detail. It's the closest segment of the composition to us. And so when we go in here to add these lines, before we start on both sides, I want to start actually right here in the middle. And I'm going to put a few more stones out in the water. These are going to be closer to us. So we're going to see more of it like that, okay? See? There we go. Over here, the trees, we might have a little bit of foliage. We have some grass growing. So you can put some lines kind of going up and down all around the bank of the little creek here. Just give the effect of there being grass or something growing here. You don't have to be super detailed. Just go in with your pencil and put a few lines here or there sticking up different ways like that. See? Over here too, a couple more. All right, now we can actually work on the stones. These little lines that form the grass also help to break up the lines forming the rocks a little bit more too. And so it gives the effect, or helps with the effect of there being distance here too. Here we go. And on this particular, here at least, you can see how, let's see if I can get this to go. There we go. You can see how I'm using the shadowing to form or make forms on the rocks. So I'm not drawing with a straight line, but I'm using shadow to give a little bit more detail to these rocks. There's nothing wrong with that. You can there's a lot of different ways to go about creating perspective and depth in a drawing. And you know, shadowing is one. You could also work with color too. Muted colors versus really strong bright colors closer to you. The further away something is, the harder it is to see. So sometimes colors even become muted. All right, let's see here. We've got this side to do now, so follow along with me. Just keep drawing these giant segments of shadow. It's popping up here and there. You're not coloring the whole thing in, remember. It's like a flat rock up here at the top up there, kind of sticking out. All right, there we go. Now, we've successfully went and created their composition in 3 stages. As we talked about in the beginning, we have stage 1, 2, and then 3. Now, I know that the drawing on the right, this one that's becoming finished, looks different than this one. Every drawing will, but you can at least see how we've planned for our perspective and then tried to follow the sketch that we've created over here, the best of our ability, to form these rows of composition. The one underlining factor about this that connects all of it together is obviously the water. So with the water now, there's a different kind of principle that you have to follow along with. With the water, you're going to want to go in and you're going to want to draw straight lines up and down very lightly at first in different areas of the water. So you've got a line here. So the water, you know, is coming down. So we don't want these to be completely uniform. We don't want it. We want them to have a little bit of a variation between each one, right? Like this. Some will be a little darker than others. Some will be lighter. But the goal is to get that effect of the water falling, okay? Now you have a little pool here that we've created. And this little pool, in order to show that this is actually a flat, maybe a flat area right here, okay? We have a little break in the water here, okay? So the water is actually going to start about there, coming down this fall, and then as you go back towards the beginning, you're going to put a little bit of shadow on each side, here and here, just inside that area. Because what that does is it shows us that there's more happening here behind these rocks than what we originally thought, right? There's something larger there, another segment of the falls, or maybe a pool of water. Now, as we get closer down towards our stream, we're going to add more lines this time, because we want the effect of what's closer to us, number one. We also want to see the water coming down, so this will be all shadowed in. Like that. Okay, and now we're going to jump on the other side and do the same thing. Here we go. And you can see what happens there. It kind of comes down, stops here at the top, up here in this little area, okay? Keeps on going, comes through that, comes to this fall here, and then now we have water that is falling into this small section of the water. Now down here is going to be a little different, because right now this looks like water coming down and it's hitting the ground and stopping, right? So we need to make sure we somehow successfully create the appearance or the impression of this being water too. And we got a few different tricks up our sleeve to be able to do that, okay? There's a couple we can actually do. The first thing we can do, we can use shadow again to highlight where the water is, so it shows that it's almost like a flat surface instead of a rocky surface, a trail. And then also we can add lines coming around the rocks, kind of following the flow of the water, okay? So that's the best way, and probably the easiest two ways for us to get this effect. I'm going to start first with the shadowing though. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to start on the left-hand side first, and what I'm going to do is turn my pencil on its side. I'm going to start close to the bank as I can get, and I'm going to come in with these straight lines. Okay? And then we're going to do the same thing over here. Okay. Now, this appears to be a flat surface, smooth surface, and now a little bit more anyway. There's still some more work to do. We can come over here, do some shadowing behind this rock. Over here. Some shadow behind this little stone. And this one. And then we are going to have shadow here too. There we go. Starting to look a little bit more like water now. I think though, once we add lines kind of showing the water flowing around the rocks though, will be good. So what I do is I follow the shape of the rock, and I make a series of these lines that appear kind of to be moving a little bit, right? Like that. It kind of shows the flow of the water. And the top. And around the edges. Okay, now we're starting to see how it's coming together a little bit more. Notice how there's some areas that I've left out a little bit of detail in. I went all the way to the right on this one, on this side, and then over here I have a little bit more that I need to fill in. I was going to have that rock be flat, but I think I'm going to switch it up now a little bit. And then down here, put a little more shadow on this side. And I honestly believe that keeping this a graphite drawing is probably going to be the best choice for us today. I really wanted to ink some, but at the scale of this drawing and with all the different highlights that we have in shadow, ink, in order to capture a highlight, you're working with, when you're working with ink, you're working with a solid color, obviously. Graphite's more of a, can be light to, it's a dry medium, so that helps a lot, and it can be taken from dark to light by pressure, right? And with an ink pen, it doesn't matter how hard I push down, every time I draw or paint or create a line, it's going to be the same value of that. It's not going to be from a really light shade of this to a dark shade. It's ink. So how we get the effect of getting a light shaded area with ink is that we use what's called cross-hatching. So you put a series of lines going in one direction and a series of lines going in the opposite direction. And if you do this enough and you do it small enough, you can get the effect of being a shadow. Probably the best way to think about this is if you had a ball here, you can draw a circle, right? Here's my circle, and my light source is up here. Here's my lamp on my desk. I turn on that light. The shadow is going to be back here, right? So with graphite, you can color it in like this. You can take it and just, very light pressure towards the top and dark, harder towards the bottom where it needs to be dark. Now let's try this with ink. So with ink, what you have to do, you have to actually go in and you have to start down here, and you want to make a solid shape first like that. Maybe another go at it here, like that. Okay. Now, after you have that, you want to go back in again, all right? And this is where you start to actually go in and do your cross-hatching, okay? So you're going to do lines. Line after line after line after line after line. And as you get towards the top of the ball, where the light source is, that's where you stop with your lines. Now here we're going to put a series of these lines going the opposite direction. Now notice as I get towards the top where the light source is, I'm making the lines smaller and further apart, okay? And what that does is if you allow a little bit of the white from the paper just come through the ink, it starts to form a gradient instead of it going from very dark to very light or vice versa. This forms a gradient. The only thing about this though is you have to continue to go back and forth a lot and refine it until it gets to where it needs to be. So see how this now starts to look like it's fading from very, very dark black to not so dark black as you get towards the top up here. Like that. There we go. It takes a lot more time. That's another reason that I think it's best to stay with graphite for the waterfall. But you can see now. So we've added just a series of these cross hatches and it forms a shadow. Okay, back to our original drawing. For this, like I said, I want to keep it, graphite I think is a great way to go, but notice some areas that we can improve on. In between these trees up here, you notice when I draw the trees in, there's spaces in between them that we might actually see other things, right? And to make them stick out, all you really need to do is go in and add a little bit of shadow in between the trees. Okay, like that, and then of course here too. And you can just do some different shapes in there. Doesn't have to be solid, something like that. And now we get to play around with it. Now you can see my hand. This is from the graphite that I've used already. I've actually done a lot of smudging on here already that you can't see that well, but it's there. Now, if you wanted to do this, you can. But you could take your finger, you can go back over it, and sometimes, students like to use their hand, but they also sell what's known as smudge sticks, which is, you don't get as messy. Of course, graphite's not that bad to wash off, but if you really don't want to get really messy, you can use a smudge stick for it. All right, here we go. And it doesn't really make a huge difference in the look of it. It just sort of blends a little bit more. It makes it, in some areas, maybe you want a bit of a lighter tone of graphite. You can use your finger after you've done this for a minute and go in like this and just put a little bit of shadow there. What's really good for, though, is the really solid dark areas. Those areas are really, really, they benefit from using this technique a lot with graphite. This side here. Like I said, it's a little hard to tell kind of what's happening, but if you work with it enough, move stuff around on the page enough, it'll all start to come together, okay? Over here on this side too. And then up the waterfall just a little bit at the bottom. And down here as well. There we go. All right. I really think this turned out pretty good. The trees at the top though, the one thing about the trees at the top is that the darker the better really, especially down here at the bottom. So if you wanted to go back in there and really put some more shadow towards the bottom of these trees, you could, kind of coming up. Because that shadow helps to frame everything, right? You can see how that's already, this dark background behind this white is making this pop out more. And it'll be the same way over here. And of course over here. And then the best part is after you do this, of course, you can go back in and smudge it and get it really dark. But it's a lot of graphite in there. Okay, we have a lot more intense shadowing going on. And we can smudge the bottom of this to really make it pop. Don't go all the way up the trees though, just the bottoms like that. Because I think it's, I think having a little bit of some white coming through here from the paper at the top of these, it enhances it a little bit. But the darker you get towards the bottom, helps to frame up the rest of this thing. So that is our waterfall. I think overall it came out pretty good. The things that I would probably want to try different next time is if you look really close at this, if you can really just kind of see it, hopefully you can, but these levels here, these stages that I have, they're not exactly straight. Like down here at the bottom, the water kind of goes up that way. I wish this would have been, a lot more straighter. And then also I think, if we had more time, we could probably fill out a little bit more details down here at the bottom towards the sides, putting some more foliage in here, some more things in the foreground. The biggest part of the foreground, remember, things closer to you can see better compared to things further away, right? So as you get further away, where your eye can see, you can actually go in and play around and put more implied lines there than trying to be more realistic. So if you like to sketch, one thing I suggest is going out in nature. This is a perfect time of year to go out and see different parts of our great landscapes here we have locally, some of the great and amazing tourist attractions that we have in terms of just scenic advantages. There's many around, literally in tri-county, multi-tri-county area, especially in Pike County. And we have a vast potential here as a county to for those out there seeking the outdoors. So those of you who like art and the outdoors, this is something really that you could combine. Now you can't lug around a sketch pad probably this size, of course, but if you had a small sketchbook you could put in your backpack or your pocket, and a pencil, and you don't need nothing fancy, literally use a little block sharpener like that. Take that with you. You could sit down when you're taking a break, and you could go and do a sketch of whatever you're seeing. Now, if you were to do something like that, and you maybe would like to send in that work, that's fine too. We'd love to show your work. It doesn't have to be what we create here necessarily, but if you take some of the principles that we've talked about and use them, and then you send it in to us, piketv99@gmail. If you send it in to us, we'd love to showcase your work. Okay, that's the main goal here, is to promote art, to promote learning, to promote continuing to learn together. That's what I'm doing. I learn every day. I draw. I learn something. If it's not new, it's a different approach at the same thing. Every single time I learn a little something different. So we really hope that you'll take some of these things we've been talking about and create your own. If you don't like waterfalls, that's perfectly fine. There's so much out there that you could use as your subject matter, right? And I think it's important, to take a moment or two and appreciate nature. I certainly need to do it more. I'm going to this fall. I'm going to make a really, really good effort to pay more attention to the scenic beauties we have here locally as a county and, of course, region and state. So I really appreciate you participating today. I hope you have had a good time. I hope you've learned a little, a couple of things. And again, we want to see your work. So if you get time to send it in, piketv99@gmail. I know I say it a lot, but that's the email address. Tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your age, your name, something like that. Whatever you want to share, okay? Well, thank you so much for your time today. On behalf of everyone here at Pike TV, just want to say thank you, and we appreciate you. And until next time, on behalf of the show, I'm Christopher Epling, and keep drawing.